Hello again. I'm back with another clock to repair. This one is a Seth Thomas chiming mantle clock. And the story on it is that I have a computer guy who does house calls, and I got in touch with him because one of my laptops needed some repairs. And he tells me that he was thinking of me because he came across this clock and it wasn't working. So I told him when he comes to fix my laptop, bring me the clock. Once it was here, he tells me that he took the movement out and sprayed it with a penetrating oil and placed it back into the case. I told him that's the last thing you want to do to try to clean and lubricate these, but he tells me that it got the clock working. The only problem is that it's running about 10 minutes slow per hour. I told him that the odds are that although the clock is running, the spray that he used perhaps gummed things up enough to slow it down. And I'm going to have to take out the movement again, totally disassemble it, and try to give it a good cleaning. Let me show a few things about this one. There's a door on the front, so you can wind it up. And when I turn it around to the back and open up the back door, when I first saw it, my question was, where's the pendulum? Now, this clock did come with some instructions. I really don't know how old it is, but what it has instead of a pendulum that hangs and swings back and forth, and I'll try to zoom in so you can see it, there's a small rotating disc right over here, and that goes back and forth and acts as the pendulum. And according to the instructions, the way to get it going is once the clock is fully wound, just by setting the clock in an upright position, it starts automatically. So let me tilt it and bring it back down and see if that works. Okay, it's not moving yet. The other way to get it started is to just advance the minute hand a little bit. Let's do that. And it looks like it's going. So what I want to do next is set this up on my work table and start to remove the movement. So let me get started on that. Okay, let me turn it over. Now the chime had already been removed from here. That's this. When it goes back in, it'll be positioned up against these holes here. A couple of screws hold it in, sort of like that. And to take out the movement, there's 8 screws holding it in. I'm going to loosen those up on my own, and once I'm ready to take it out, I will continue. But what I have to do first is remove the hands. To do that, there's a small nut holding the minute hand. Let's see if that's too tight to do by, and a little tight. Okay. Very good. Now I can go back to removing the screws that are holding the movement in. And again, once I have them out, then I'll continue. Okay, the screws are out. Let's lift out the movement. And a couple of interesting things that I'm seeing off the bat here. There's printing on the back of it. It reads, made in Germany for Seth Thomas, that it is 2 joules and unadjusted. And there's a label on the back door here with a stamp on it that reads 060283. So I'm thinking this may have been made in June 2nd of 1983. Anyway, let me put the case on the side and we'll take a close look at the movement now. Now I can give you a close-up now of this pendulum disc. Let me see if I can get it going here. And the way that you adjust the time on it, see if you can see it, there's a minus sign over here and a plus over here. And there's a little arm sitting on top of this disc. And the instructions in the booklet here say to hold the disc with one hand, with one finger, and then with another one, you're just rotating this little arm on top, a little bit to the left or to the right if you want the clock to go slower or faster. Now, what I did read in here is that there are a series of holes, and the arm that you're adjusting will lock into each one of those holes. And each time you move from one hole to another, that represents a 10-second difference in the time per day. To me, it seems that it might be next to impossible to adjust this to run accurately, mainly because, let's say your clock is running 5 seconds slow and you're per day, and you're only able to adjust this in 10-second increments. It's going to end up running either 5 seconds slow or 5 seconds fast, as compared to traditional hanging pendulums that have the little screw to adjust them. Those I can adjust so that they're actually keeping perfect time just month after month after month. So anyway, just thoughts that I'm having. What I'm going to do next, because looking inside here, it's definitely a very complex setup. So I'm going to take a series of photos just so I have a pretty good idea of how everything is positioned before I begin to take it apart. So let me work on that first. I've got my photos. What I have to do next is let down the springs. And there's 3 of them here. This is the ratchet wheel, here's the arbor, and this is the click. And I'll try to show how this is done. What you need to use is what's known as a letdown key, which is something like this, because when you place this over the arbor and free up the click, this will rapidly unwind, and you don't want to whack your fingers with the ends, the handles on the key. So let me zoom in and I'll try to show you how I let it down. First, I'll just turn it a little bit to free up the click, and then push it aside and just let it unwind. That one's down. Now this one, may have to turn it the other way. This is not very wound. That one's down. This is pretty wound. Yep. Oh, look out. Okay. Now let me zoom out. To take this apart, what I'm seeing, 4 nuts are holding these little handles on. So I'll probably start with that, and just have to take a really close look before undoing them, because there's screws everywhere holding a lot of parts down. So I got to take this one pretty slow. So give me some time to come up with a plan of attack. One thing I want to mention first, however, is that before starting the video, I did attempt to adjust the time on the clock to see if I could get it to run properly, and I was not able to. And I just want to show how that's done. Let me zoom in a bit here for that. Okay, you have the pendulum disc, and sitting on top of it is a small arm. And depending on which way you move it, this is the arm here. Pushing it this way will make the clock run slower, and away from me makes it go faster. And there's only so far you can rotate these, and then they kind of lock, they get stuck. If I could get it to move further, I'd probably have a better chance of getting this accurately adjusted. Anyway, back to figuring out how to take it apart. I think I figured out what I have to do. As mentioned, I have to remove the 4 nuts here, which will help to get this plate removed. But before I do that, all these parts on top have to come off. I mentioned the names of some of them. I'll just go over that again a little bit. I mentioned the ratchet wheel, the arbor, the click. This is the ratchet wheel bridge. This here is called the snail, and this is the rack. And the way a lot of these parts are held on, very small, what I call C-clips. And I have to pop them off in order to lift each piece out. Some are held on by little set screws in here. So I have to loosen that to remove that part. And each part that I remove, I'm going to take a photo and try to get a really accurate record of how it's going to go back together. So let me start doing some of that on my own, and I'll show as much of it as I can. I've loosened the set screw on this part over here, and there's actually 2 screws, one on either side of it. And I should be able to slip it off. Next, I have a C-clip over here, and if I can get that off easily, I'll do it while you watch. Oh, that wasn't bad. It's good to have a screwdriver with a magnetic tip, less likely to lose parts. That should enable me to remove this. Next, I have the snail is being held on here by a little disc. It locks underneath it, and that's held on by this C-clip. Let me try to remove that. Let me start collecting these parts. This one's proving to be a little stubborn, so I'm not going to force it. I don't want to bend it. Let me work on that one on my own, and then I'll continue. The clip is off. I can remove the disc. And now the snail should lift up. And along with the photos that I'm taking, not only of how I'm removing it, but in particular the exact position that they're sitting. Okay, next I will work on removing, there's a small clip holding the rack. Let's see if I can get that off easily. Well, that's what you have to watch out for. That one popped off, but fortunately I didn't lose it. And I got to be a little bit more careful going forward. All right, now the rack should lift up. Now what I'm seeing here, I have another clip here, along with a small spring, another spring over here. Let me take some closer, a closer look at that, because I don't want the springs to go flying off either. So give me a moment to work on that. Okay, I think I know what I have to do next. Let me zoom in again. Oh, and I can remove this gear. And one thing I have that I forgot about using, which I've put on here, I have these support legs that attach to the back plate, and it allows the whole movement to just sit upright. It makes it a lot easier to view it and to work on. Anyway, there's a spring over here attached to this arm and on this upright. And what I'm going to look to do is remove it from here, hopefully leave it attached to this, and then remove this little clip. And this arm should then come off. So let's see how that works. Oh, there's the spring. Now the clip. Okay. Now the small one almost got away from me. And this should just lift off. Okay. Still got the spring there. All right. The one thing I'm seeing that is a concern is I have this part here, and let me bring it up to show you. This seems to be stuck to the gear right underneath it. And in fact, when I move it, the gear moves a bit as well. And I don't know yet how this is going to come off of here, whether this is just forced over the post that it's sitting on. But until I remove this, I'm not going to be able to get these plates apart. So either I'll figure out now how to deal with it, or look to take a few of these off first, but give me some time to check that out. What I've decided to do is to remove these first. This one is being held on. There's a couple of set screws underneath it, and I'll zoom in a bit again here. This piece is also being held underneath the plate. You can see that screw right there. So let me loosen that. And there we go. So that comes all the way out, and the set screw that came off of it. So let me tighten that back up here. So we have that. Now this one, loosen that. It feels pretty tight. I can pry it off a little bit. Yeah, here we go. Almost. I think I need a wider screwdriver blade. Let's see what we have here. Okay, got it. All right, now this part with the spring here is a small C-clip. Let's see if I can remove that without causing it to go flying. Got it without risk of losing. Very good. And let's see if this lifts up. Okay. What I'm going to do next is take a closer look at how to remove this. Maybe try to pry it up a bit. It could take a while, so let me do that on my own, and then we'll continue. Okay, I'm a bit disappointed for two reasons, and I'll try to show. The first is I just can't budge this part. I don't know why it's so tight, but not only can I not remove this part, but I've realized that this here is attached to this gear on the inside. This is not coming off either. And until I can figure out how to get this off and this off, there's no way I can remove the plates. So I think what I'm going to do is look to reassemble the whole thing, get it back into the case, see if it still works. And if I can, at some point, find out how this is supposed to be taken apart, I can revisit it. I'm pretty much going to reverse all the steps you just saw me do in taking it apart. I'm not going to spend a lot of time having you watch me reassemble it. So when I come back, everything should be back into position. As promised, I have everything back together. I believe I've assembled it correctly. I also wound the 3 springs. And before placing it back into the case, I want to set this up on my workbench and see if it's actually functioning properly. It has to sit like this, and you'll see it better if I position it there. I can give the pendulum a turn though. Let's see if it's working at all. And that seems to be functioning. So let me get this set up on my bench, and we'll take it from there. I've got it set up. I also placed the minute hand, and if I hold it up, you can see it is running. And what I want to do now is advance the hand. Let's see what happens. Give it the 1/4 hour, and you can see the hammer's working. Let's try another 1/4. So that's encouraging. That seems to be how it should be working. I'm going to let this run overnight, and if it's still running in the morning, then I'm going to place it back into the case, and we'll see how accurate it's keeping time. Okay, I've had it running now for about actually a day and a half, and as you can see, I also placed the hour hand on so I could get a pretty good idea of how accurate it is. And it's running now about 5 minutes slow per day, which is a big improvement over 10 minutes slow per hour. However, I still like to figure out a way to adjust it more accurately, and what I'll probably play with is I'll work on the little disc, the pendulum disc that's on the top there, if I can somehow bypass the stop when you adjust those arms. The other odd thing I'm noticing, and I kind of noticed this before I took it out of the case, the hammers, although they work for the chime, they seem to be off, and I'll try to show how that is. At the 1/4 hour, they should just do the 4 tones. It's the Westminster chime. So, get this to the 1/4 hour. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Go to the 1/2 hour. 1, 2, 3, 4, and another 4. 2, 3, 4. At the 3/4, that should just be 3 times. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 4. And it should stop, but it doesn't. It does another 1, 2, 3, 4, and then chimes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 o'clock. If I go up to the 12, I get the 4. 1/4 hour, I get the 2. half hour. I should just get 3. But it does another 4. And then it starts chiming again. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I really don't know why it's chiming every 45 minutes instead of on the hour. When I repositioned all the parts, I made sure that it was in the exact position it was when I took it apart. Anyway, let me initially get to work on trying to get it running more accurately. I think is the most important part. So let me get to work on that. Okay, let me bring you up to date on what I've done. 2 things. The first one was with some synthetic clock oil. I decided to lubricate the pivots around the pendulum disc, the top and the bottom of it, and whatever parts were moving that I could find. The second thing I did was I popped off one of the stops that controls the adjustment arm. I didn't want to take both of them off because I thought that arm might have actually become dislodged. But I do believe that I was able to adjust it a little bit further. It's actually been running now for 2 days. And if I didn't know any better, it might be running maybe a minute fast per day. It's hard to tell for sure because I don't have a dial set up yet. So I can't be 100% certain which minute the hands are pointing to, but it's close enough that my plan is to place this back into the case, reassemble everything with a dial, we'll set it up, and we'll see how accurate it is. I'll try to show what I did when I mentioned that I cut off one of the little stops that was controlling the adjustment arm. I'm talking about, let me show you here. You can see one of them is right here, that little dot. And there's one on the opposite side, which I was able to clip off using just a little pair of snippers here. Kind of came in underneath it from the side and removed it pretty easily. Anyway, what I want to do next is get this back into the case. Now I just have to secure it with the 8 screws. I will do that on my own, and then I'll continue. It's in. I just have to tighten one last screw. And now I can insert the chime. And this will take a bit of manipulation to get it in here properly and secure it with a couple of screws. So let me work on that. The chime is in. What I have to do now is place the hands back on. And normally I would be synchronizing the hands to the hour, but because this seems to be chiming every 45 minutes, it doesn't pay. It's not worth the effort. So I'm going to start with the minute hand to make sure this is pointing to an hour. And then we'll seat the hour hand. And the minute hand. Secure it with the nut. Let's tighten that up a bit more. Okay, we'll set this back up on my workbench and check to see if it's running accurately and play with the chimes a bit and see exactly how they're sounding. I have it set up and running. Let's see what happens when I advance the hand. that would have been a quarter tone, and clearly the chime rods need to be adjusted because the hammers are, looks like it's hitting the rod and then staying pressed against it, so it's muffling the sound. So I'm going to have to work on that. Let's go another quarter hour. All right, let's see if I can get this sounding better, even though I may end up having this clock run as a non-chiming one, and I'll flipping it over to the silent mode, which you can do. But anyway, let me work on getting it to sound a bit better. I'm going to try to show how to adjust the hammers when they hit the chime. You really, I mentioned I'm adjusting the chime, you really have to bend the arms on the hammers. And I've done a few of them already, so now when I let it go, it sounds more of a clear tone. If I work my way down, that's a bit muffled, and that one's awful. So you just have to try to grab, just bend it back just a little bit. And I have to do that to the last couple, but I just wanted you to have an idea of how you go about adjusting the chimes. I've adjusted the chimes. I think it's sounding a lot better. Let's give it a try. Definitely sounds better, and what's unusual to me, it seems as if it's doing the quarter tone, the half-hour tone, and then it's combining the three-quarter tone with the on the hour chime, and it ends up running chiming every 45 minutes, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that corrected. In any event, I'm still rather pleased. Well, actually, what I have to do now, I'm happy with how it's coming out so far, but next I need to let this run for a day or two and see about adjusting the accuracy of the time. So once I get that where I want it, I will continue. Okay, I have it running now for close to 2 days, and it's about 1.5 minutes slow. I've adjusted it as much as I can. I don't think I'm going to get it any better than this, although it's still a big improvement over from when I started, when it was about 10 minutes slow per hour. If there are any Seth Thomas clock experts out there, I'd love to hear from you regarding what else I might do to improve it. I'd be more than willing to take this apart again, especially if you can tell me how to get those couple of parts off that I just could not budge, as well as what to do to get the chime working on the hour instead of on every 45 minutes. In any event, we're looking at a Seth Thomas Mantel chime clock. It was assembled on June 2nd of 1983. I'd love to hear any comments you have on this one, and that pretty much wraps things up. Bye for now.